two things, you know, what you don't ever talk about. That's politics and religion. Well, apparently I didn't listen to either one of them, because you're looking at a preacher who's also a politician. But I'll tell you this, neither my preaching nor my politicking would have got that far down the road if it hadn't been for sugar. It was sugar that taught me to pray. I promise you it was. Every Sunday afternoon we'd go to Grandma and Grandpa Henry's house, 25, 30, 40 Henrys would show up out there. I mean, she would cook a feast on a wood stove. Remember that? Sunday afternoon. And the crown jewel, I mean the pièce de résistance. I've been waiting since high school French to use that phrase. of the Sunday dinner was a big green bowl of banana pudding. I mean the cream, the vanilla wafers, the bananas. Oh, I'm lusting in my heart just thinking about it. The meringue on top, 3-4 inches on top. And you know, oh man, I can see it now. It's been years ago. But the tradition was back in those days that the Grandma Henry's kitchen and dining room was not big enough to fit all of us at the same time. So the tradition was that the adults ate first. We had to stay out in the yard and play. The kids did while the adults were eating. Remember that? And my cousin would be over there playing, and that's where I learned to pray. I found a new tree, and I got down on my knees and said, "Dear God in heaven, please let there be some of that banana pudding left when I get over and I get in there." That's where I learned to pray. Sugar. And my politics. Just moved to a new town, graduated from school, Cookville, Tennessee. My friend and I knew I was kind of interested in politics. He said, "You know, you need to run for mayor." I said, "Mayor? Run for mayor? How many people run for mayor?" He said, 13. I said, 13? Really? I said, "Nobody knows me, this guy here." He said, "Let me give you some political advice. Chocolate." He pulls out of his pocket a candy bar. You remember the old Henry candy bars? Old Henry, well, Henry's my last name. He said, "Man, this candy bar's got your name on it. It's divine. All you have to do is walk around 2 or 3 months and knock on doors and say, 'Hey, you might not vote for me, but you will remember my name.'" Well, I did that for a while, you know. And I want you to know quickly that you can pick up a gavel and bang it and say, "I call this meeting to order. I was elected mayor of the town." You can look it up on the power of sugar. Well, after that, I thought, I'm going to take my sugar message to the state capitol, Nashville, Tennessee. I'm going to run for the State House of Representatives. Did the same thing. You might not vote for me, but you will remember my name. Well, you know, the governor of our state came to town and put his arm around not me, but my opponent, and said, "This is the man we want you to send to Nashville to represent you." And I thought, well, I didn't like that. And we had a boy run in Tennessee run for president of the United States that same year. Came in, put his arm around my opponent, said, "This is the man we want you to elect." That didn't bother me a bit. You know what? They didn't know what my people wanted. My people wanted chocolate. They wanted sugar. I mean, before you know it, boom, before you know it, I was in the state capitol making state law, chopping down on chocolate bars. Finally, he said, "Well, what did you do next? Run for governor?" Well, yeah. I took my chocolate message to all 95 counties of Tennessee in the primary. That's where you raise somebody in your own party. 4 or 5 of us running in the primary. 90 out of 95 counties, I won in the primary. Other 5 counties, I guess they were just full of vegetarians. Finally, there was one person left. Me and the other party guy. He was a wise, savvy man. First day of the campaign, he comes out and he says, "Well, I've been around a long time. All I need is a few vanilla wafers and a cup of coffee, and I'll be ready to go to work the same day." He stole my sugar message. And from that minute on, there was only one issue. You want the chocolate, you want the vanilla wafers. Well, sad to say, a lot more people voted for the vanilla wafer than the chocolate. But nonetheless, it has been a great sugar high and a great, wonderful life. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. All right. Hannah Helm. Just walk in. You're the next. Don't worry, tell her. You want a minute? I can call somebody else. I can call somebody else and give you a minute. Okay, I'll get somebody else and then you can be next, okay? I promise. All right, we got one here, and it is Skybird.
My name is Skyber, and I'm going to tell this scary story, and it's another one I learned off Octavia Sexton. It's called Thump Slide. Now, it was a long time ago, and there's this woman that lived up on a hill, way back in the holler, and she had this husband, and he wanted to go join the Civil War because they thought it'd only be a couple weeks. Well, turns out it wasn't a couple weeks, and that was a very bloody part of our history. Well, he stocked her up on food, and he gave her some money. He didn't want to leave her with nothing, and he went out, got killed right off the bat. But she didn't know that he was dead. She was either waiting for him to come back or waiting to hear that he wasn't coming back. Because lines of communication wasn't like they are today. And, well, she sat there, and she sat there, and she waited. And then one day she got low on coffee, creamer, and sugar. She went to the store. She laid down she reached in her big old purse and pulled out the exact amount of money it took. And there's a boy that was just peeking through the windows. And he got jealous. Well, everybody, they're broke. How are they doing this? And he got an idea. And he followed her. And he followed her home. And he watched through the windows. And he watched where she stocked up her food, where she put her money. And he kept coming back. And he did this day after day after day. Until one day, she had a sack of dried apples. And she was scooping them in the sack. And she went in, goes in, and the boy follows her. She gets up to the loft. Steps in. Now, the only piece of furniture in that loft was a stool that she used to step up and reach into the rafters. Now, the rafters were so perfect, the condition that could preserve that sack of dried apples perfectly. That's where she put her canned food, and she had farm implements. And so she stepped up on the stool. And as soon as she hooked that sack of dried apples, that boy took a farm lumber, hit her in the head, split her scalp wide open. And there she laid. He's like, well, dead people can't hurt nobody. But that boy, he locked the door anyway. He went out, and that woman laying there, and her bone in her leg had broke. Snapped in half, it was sticking through the flesh. And there she lay. But that woman, she wasn't dead. She was still alive. She went to the door. She couldn't move without making this sound. Thump, slide, thump, slide. As she moved around till she got to the door, she couldn't open it. She was locked in, so she tried to get out. And she clawed till splinters filled her fingers. And she laid there. And I don't know if you've ever seen an animal in a wild cage, but it'll claw and it'll try to get out the best it can. Until one day, it just loses all feeling. And that's what happened to that woman. And she laid there, circling the room. Thump, slide, thump, slide. Until one day, feeling came back to her, and that feeling was hunger. She was hungry. She looked up at that sack of dried apples, and she reached. So close, but yet so far. And she looked there, and she paced. Thump, slide, thump, slide. And she propped herself in a corner against the wall. And then she died. And that boy, well, he had spent all the money, sold all the food, spent all that money, and he didn't have nothing left. So he went back. And he got more. But But there wasn't much to get because he had left the door open, of course. And so he went into the loft because he remembered that sack of dried apples. Stepped up. And there was a woman propped up against the corner of the wall. Now, like I said, the conditions in those rafters were so right, her flesh wouldn't rot. It would just dry and peel back. And her eyes dried and popped back in their sockets. And there she was. Dead people can't hurt nobody. He set up the stool, stepped on it, and he raged. But all darkness fell. And in the darkness he could hear a sound. Thump, slide, thump, slide, thump, slide, thump, slide, thump, slide. And around his ankles wrapped sharp skeleton claws. And in his legs sunk deep, sharp skeleton teeth. And over the heels a blood-curdling scream. And there was an army man. He heard it. He gathered up some men about 9 o'clock, opened the door. Something ran off the porch. They didn't know what it was. It could have been an animal. It could have been anything. Went in, and they saw the loft, and they just had to go in. And on the floor laid a pile of bloody human bones. And on the stool was the head of that young boy, with eyes still shaking in fear. And they say that it was that woman that ran off the porch, and the one that lies in under bed, and she'll wait, and for somebody to hang an arm, or a leg, or a long string of hair out. She's just waiting to grab it. If you don't believe me, try that tonight. She'll be happy to have you for a midnight snack. And that's the end of that story.
Okay, Hannah, you're up.
Well, I don't know how many of y'all, do I need to use this?
Sure. Yes.
Okay. Have been to the John Campbell Folk School, but it's kind of where I got my start into storytelling. But I've been to some other classes there. And I went recently for a Native American flute class. And they had some storytellers one evening. And I took the bones of this story and turned it into a story that I told as part of the Kentucky Liars contest a couple of months ago. So my friend...
And she won first place.
Newt Rary from North Carolina is the one who kind of got the bones of this story for me. Anyway, Newt and I were sitting there at breakfast one morning at the folk school. They feed you fine food at the folk school, and a lot of it they grow and produce right there. And so there was some blackberry jam and biscuits that morning. And man, that blackberry jam was so good. I said, Newt, you better be having some of this jam. I mean, it is good stuff. Oh, Hannah, I had to give up blackberry jam years ago. I said, why in the world would anybody give up on blackberry jam? Oh, it's a long story. I said, well, you know, it's breakfast. Tell me the story. I said, well, when I was a little boy, my grandma, she had the best blackberry patch in the county. And she would put up pints and pints of blackberry jam. She was known for her blackberry jam. And as the years went by, she started getting a little older and a little more decrepit, and my mama started worrying about her. And so on my way home from school, I would stop in and check on her. So one day I came into the house, and before I even got in the door, I could kind of tell something didn't seem right. And I walk in the door. Now, Grandma, she loved her afternoon soap operas, and she's reared back in her Barco lounger, sound asleep. She also couldn't hear very well. But the minute I walked in the room, I hear this a hissing and a jiggling and coming from the kitchen. And I bolted through the room, and there's her little feist dog laying in her lap, and I guess he thought I was going to attack her. He leaped out after me and grabbed me in the rear end, and I get in the kitchen, and there is a canner full of blackberry jam. And that pressure regulator is just going, and the next thing I know, that thing blows off the canner, goes through the ceiling, through the roof, and it may still be orbiting the earth. And that canner, it was red hot. And I found some hot pads, and I yanked that thing off the stove and bolted out the back door. And I see a trough full of water out in the back. Now, I didn't know any better, and so I take that thing over there to put it in water, and that hot metal hit that water, and kablam! The whole thing blows up, and the next thing you know, me and Festus hanging on to my rear end, we are being propelled into the atmosphere. And wouldn't you know, there is a dang flock of geese flying over. And I hit one of those geese, and I got blackberry jam all over me, and now I got goose feathers all over me. And I'm flying through the air, and an airplane goes by, and the people have their faces pressed against the glass. They have no idea what they're looking at. And we keep arcing over through the sky, and finally there is this big old spruce tree. And I hit that spruce tree, and it doesn't kill me. And I sort of slide down, boom, 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 limb from limb. By now, at least Festus has let go of my rear end. And I plop down at the base of that tree, and I'm sitting there dazed, and I kind of pass out. And when I wake up, I'm looking eyeball to eyeball with a dang bear who was a-licking that blackberry jam off of me. And I was afraid to move. And I just prayed the Lord had saved me. And sure enough, when that bear had licked all that blackberry jam off of me, he just wandered away. And I managed to find my way back to Grandma's, and I have never had a bite of blackberry jam since.
She is the Kentucky Liar of the Year. She won first place. First place for that story. So good, so good.
All right, see what we got next here. All right. Will Matthews. Is Will still here?
Not here.
Okay? He was here. Elaine.
She's not here.
She is. Is her last name Laird?
No, I just have Elaine.
You?
Yeah.
She just couldn't hear you.
I understand why. You want to hold?
To voice myself, yeah.
Okay, then I don't.
Elaine, ask her, does she need a voice interpreter?
No.
I already asked her.
Okay.
She doesn't want one, she wants to do it herself.
Okay.
I tried to sign.
Oh, you gonna, if you, she gonna
She
sign.
needs to stand near the mic.
I tried to get close to it, maybe that'd be better. That better? Okay.
Get to the mic.
Try. The name of this story is called The Model. I'm a signed model. Because he posed and posed, model. There was a model. She practicing posing, but she has a problem. She's nervous. Let's watch. Oh. Relax, relax. Oh. Okay. Relax. My nails, they're awful. Ah. Okay. First, fix the nails, then practice again. So she went looking for a nail shop. Latoria Nails. She went in. A lady. Hello, can I help you? Yes, my nails. Let me be fixed. The model noticed that she was the only one in the store, the only one in the shop. Your business is slow today? Yeah, it's been slow for a long time. I'm thinking about closing the shop. Closing the shop? Yeah, I'm sorry. Well, what you think? Oh, I like them, thank you. Thank you. I hope you don't have to close the shop. Thanks, I hope so too. Bye. I wish I could help her. Okay, practice. Oh. Across the street, a mother and a daughter come. Mom, look at the model. Is she real? I don't know. She's not moving. Oh, I like her outfit. Look at her nails. You want to get your nails polished? Yeah. Okay. Now, Latoria Nails. Let's go in. I did. I didn't move. I did it. Yes. Oh, now I know how to help Latoria. Two girls came. Hey, look at the model. She looks real. Yeah. I like her hair. Look at her shoes. Wow. Hey, look at her nails. Oh, red. Like that. Me too. Hey, let's go into. Oh, do you want your nails polished? Yes. Okay. Latoria shop. Let's go in. Okay. Yes. A husband, wife. The wife. Look at the model. Oh. For your birthday, your nail polish, feet polish, massage your feet. For your birthday? I would love it, yes. Okay, okay. Now, toil your nails. Let's go in. So she posed, and people went to toil your nails. I'm not nervous anymore. So she looked into the toilet window to see what's going on. The toilet was busy, but happy and she decided to see what would happen if she goes into the shop. Let's see. Hi, Victoria. Oh, hi. I see you're busy, have a lot of customers. Yeah. I don't know what happened, but I don't know how it happened. Many people are coming in. I'm so excited. Good. While they was talking, the people was watching them, watching a model. They couldn't believe she was real. The people. That's good. Okay. Well, I'll see you later. Okay. Bye. Bye.
I think we have time for one more, and then we'll have to start the program, and there'll be more open mic a little bit later. Mary Hamilton.
I'd been married about 5 years when my sister decided to give me a subscription to Better Living for Today's Woman magazine. I had that magazine for several months, and I got that typical phone call where a sweet-voiced young thing on the other end asked me to renew my subscription. And I said, no, I don't believe I'm going to be doing that. And she said, oh, may I ask why? And she was so polite, and she sounded so disappointed that I decided I would explain. And so I told her, said, I read your magazine. I read your magazine. It had some very interesting articles. One of the first articles that caught my interest was the one about recycling discarded woolens into holiday decor. Well, my husband had this scarf that I had never seen him wear in the whole 5 years that we had been married, and I looked at the directions you had for how to make a wreath out of a scarf, and I thought, I can do that. So when I had a day off, I got busy. I went to the craft store and I bought a glue gun, I bought some glue sticks, and I bought a wreath form, and I bought a wreath hanger. All that set me back nearly $7,500 out in that vicinity, but I took it all home, And I taught myself how to use that glue gun. And by the time he came home from work, I sure enough had created a wreath out of that old scarf of his. And I said, honey, look what I made today. And he looked at that wreath and he said, well, that's nice. You know, the colors in that wreath remind me of a scarf my grandmother made for me. It was the last thing she knitted for me before she died. The next day I called in sick. It was a legitimate mental health day. Because I had to spend that whole day taking that sucker apart. And in case you ever need to know, if you use those tiny little manicure scissors, you can remove glue dots from woolens without leaving any truly discernible holes. And so I got that thing all taken apart. I busted up that wreath form. I hid it in the bottom of the trash. I took that wreath hanger. I hid it in my underwear drawer. I didn't think he'd be spending time in there. And I took that scarf and I put it back where I had found it. And I figured I was home free. But he came in from work that evening, looked around and said, where's the wreath? And I said, I didn't make that for us. I didn't make that for us. No, I made that for my great Aunt Mary Helen. She lives all the way out in California, and I mailed that to her today. I did not make that for us. I had been married 5 years, and that was the first time I had lied to my husband. And I'm telling you, people, I felt so guilty about lying to my husband that, well, I said to the lady, when your holiday magazine started coming out with all the holiday recipes in them, I knew how I could make it up to him. So I started making those holiday recipes. Now, and I didn't make the ones that really were heavily dependent on nuts because he doesn't eat nuts. But if I could do it without nuts, I made it. And ma'am, even though your magazine clearly states that every ingredient in those recipes is readily available, I want you to know that I live in Frankfort, Kentucky, and I had to make trips to both Lexington and Louisville to find vanilla that comes from Madagascar. And even though that vanilla from Madagascar cost 6 times what the vanilla would have cost that I could have bought at my local Kroger store, ma'am, I am not at all sure that Madagascar vanilla made a discernible difference in the taste of the recipe, but I did what you said. And those ingredients, I mean, they were costly, but I made everything, and of course, because I made it all, I had to help my husband eat it all, and, well, I gained weight. But lucky for me, your January issue arrived with those wonderful articles about how to lose that holiday weight gain. And I studied those articles, and I looked at the various things that you suggested, and I decided that walking, yes, I could do walking. That was going to be the one that I could do. But in your article, you specified that it was very important if you were going to engage in walking that you take very good care of your feet. And so I bought those walking shoes that you recommended. Those cost nearly $200, but I was going to take good care of my feet. And if you think that I'm going to do laundry more than once a week, you're going to have to think again. So I had to buy 7 pairs of those walking socks that you recommended, and those were $28 a pair. But I did it, and I started in walking, and she said, ma'am, you are truly an ideal subscriber to Better Living for Today's Woman magazine. So I'll tell you what I'm going to do for you. I am going to arrange for you to have a 2-year subscription for the price of 1. And I said, no, you are not paying attention to me. Your magazine, it's ruining my bank account. It's ruining my relationship with my husband. I cannot afford your magazine. No, I do not want your magazine. I value our bank account. I value my relationship with my husband. To which she said, speaking of your relationship to your husband, what did you think about our February issue? You know, for Valentine's Day, we had that article, 50 Ways to Enliven Your Bedroom. we've gotten a lot of positive response to that article. And I said, that article? That article. I shared that article with my husband. We made it to about idea number 35. And I want you to know that now, every single person in the local chiropractor's office knows both of us by our first names. And I do not really appreciate that. Well, folks, she hung up. So I guess she finally believed me, and she finally understood why I was not going to renew my subscription to Better Living for Today's Woman magazine.
What a great array. Hey. And we're going to move on to the evening program. If Adam's ready. I'm ready. He's ready. He moved.
It's been a great weekend, and Adam has contributed greatly to it, his storytelling, his workshop. And I've seen him having conversations with people all around. He's been very generous in his presence. So let us again welcome award-winning and cinematic storyteller, Adam Booth.
Thank you. I thought I would kick off our evening concert with a story that I learned in Kentucky. My take on it. Stepping away from this one. Someone said I have a large wingspan. I don't want to hit that. The curtains were closed, and fresh cloth was stretched tight and smoothed out. Handfuls of flower petals scattered about the room fragranced the air. The deathbed had been made. For the ill queen had woken up that morning feeling something behind her head in the pillow. And when they checked, all the feathers had formed together into a nest. Going widdershins, it was the death crown, a sign that she would die that day. And as she lay there in the deathbed, because she was royalty, few people were allowed to come see her in those final hours, the very last one being her own daughter. Jenny, my dear, since I married the king, your stepfather, there's very little that belongs to me that I can pass along to you. The one thing I have is this. And she touched the ring there on her finger. Honey, I give it to you, and I want you to wear it every day, and whenever you see that gold shining in the light, I want it to be a reminder that you should live a very pure life. Whenever you see the sun shining through the diamond on the top of it, let it be a reminder for you to be just as bright. Do that for me, honey. And she slipped her finger out of it and pressed it into the flesh of her daughter's palm. And it was not until her mother's eyes were closed and pieces of silver were laid over them that she slipped her own finger into that ring. It wasn't even a week later that Jenny was out in her stepfather's fields. The king had so much that belonged to him. And on some days she liked to go out into those fields and look at the wildflowers as they blew in the breeze. She loved wildflowers. She loved to look beyond them at all of the servants working for the king there, some with tools, some of them working with beasts of the field. She just liked to observe it all. Imagine her surprise when she heard the sound of pipes coming through the field. She turned, and there, so far away, she could see a royal procession heading out into the field. At the very head of it was the king's mouth, the man that did all the speaking for the king. Behind him, 2 pipers. They had bladders squeezed under their elbows, droning out that sound that she heard now. As they came out toward her. Behind those 2 pipers, a whole passel of young women, virgins, dressed in pastel dresses. And behind them, shirtless, muscular men, strong men, servants that were carrying a sedan, each of them an end of a pole in their hands. And the sedan had a throne upon which sat the king. And out into the fields they came processing. Imagine Jenny's surprise as it grew to find that that royal procession was coming to her, stopping right there. And the king's mouth spoke directly. The king desires you to know that there will be another wedding this weekend. What? How could there be? She said, my mother hasn't even been in the ground for 4 days at this point. It will be. Your presence is demanded. No, she said, I won't do it. I won't come to something like that. How could I see him marry someone else when my mother is barely dead? Everyone in the land knows that she just died. Who in their right mind would agree to marry him? The mouth looked at her. She said it again. Who is it? Who is the king going to marry? Tell me. I demand to know. And he looked at her and said, You. What? She had no words for the feeling. She looked over out into the field searching for something to say, and as she looked over, she could see beyond the flowers. There was one of the king's servants wrestling with the end of a rope. The other end of it was around a donkey's neck. That donkey had bags on both sides of its body, and it was trying to be pulled this way, and the donkey wouldn't do it. Its hind quarters were back like this, and it was shaking its head and wrestling like that. No! And in that moment, she felt a kindred connection to the donkey. She looked back and said, Marry the king? Marry the king? That would be a worse burden than having to live in the skin of that donkey. The mouth ran back to the sedan, and she saw as it was lowered to the ground, and when the mouth came back, he said, The king says, if that's what you wish, then so it shall be. And those strong servants came over and they grabbed a hold of her. And even though she kicked and tried to move out of their arms, she couldn't. She was small and they were large, and they drug her across the field far, far till they came to the small wooden building. Inside of it, there was a long, narrow farm table on the top of which lay a donkey's carcass. A donkey that had just died a few days before, and because they were a resourceful people, it had been skinned and was laying out to dry for leather. If this is what you wish, then that is what it will be. And they held her as the donkey's skin was placed over her body and fastened with heavy twine, first around her ankles so that the hooves of the donkey was right behind her heels, and then around her waist so that the tail came down her backside and almost touched the ground. Over her shoulders it was draped, and along her arms tied again with that heavy twine around her wrists so that the other hooves were there. And then the neck and head of the donkey placed over her own crown. And for 3 days she was held there in that position, under watch, as that donkey's skin grew tighter and taut and dried all around her own body until there was no way for her to remove it. And even though she fought against them, 3 days is a long time to fight. And on the 3rd day, she collapsed to the ground in exhaustion. She was lifted up and they carried her out to a stable that was reserved for the donkeys. There was an empty stall, and they laid her down there. And it was sometime later, maybe the next day, that she came to, because something was nipping right at her ear. Something wet. She looked. It was the lips of another donkey. No one right there. And she smacked at it like that. "Leave me alone, you dumb beast." Oh, and it kind of trotted back that way. She went to stand up, but she couldn't, because of the weight that she was now carrying. She couldn't stand up on 2, but she could make it on 4. And that's how she made her way out of the stable and away from the king's land and off into the wilderness. Now, it was sometime later that she had found her way into a glen, and there was a nice rill coming off of the mountain, and she was thirsty, and she made her way over to it, and she was cupping her hand, just drinking so gently from that nice, clear, pure water, when something over to the side caught her attention. She thought, what could it be? So she turned to look. Aha! A rope was thrown around her neck. Gotcha! A rope that had been thrown by the short, stout, strong woman. She wrapped that rope around the donkey's neck and began to pull, and as she pulled, Jenny stood up like this, and the woman, she was startled and jumped back. What are you? Stay back. Fawn? Satyr? Demon? What are you? No, said Jenny as she loosened the rope from her neck. A woman. A woman? Yes, in a donkey's skin. Why? Because of something I said. Because of something that I would not do. Now, the woman that was trying to catch what she thought was a donkey, she was an innkeeper. She had an inn and a tavern, and she had found as her adult life's work was collecting strange people. Strange, queer people to work there for her. And looking at Jenny, looking at this young woman in a donkey skin, she thought she found her another. I have an inn and a tavern not far from here. If you don't have a place to go, you could go there. I'd give you some work to do. You could work in the scullery. You'd start boiling water, cleaning dishes, sweeping floors. It's not much, but it's a home if you'd have it. I'd have you. And as Jenny looked at this woman, there was something about her that just felt more comforting than she'd felt in a long time. A little more maternal. She touched the ring that was on her finger and looked down and happened to see that the sun was going right through the diamond and making an image on the grass there. And so she said, yes, I would like that. And so that's what's happened. She moved over and into that inn and into the tavern, and she worked on the back side of it, first in the scullery, boiling water, cleaning dishes, sweeping floors. She never, ever went to the front part where the guests were or where the guests ate, for fear that if they saw her, they'd be afraid or maybe would tell people about this creature. Well, she was good at what she did. And she got along with all the other young women that were a little bit strange, a little different, that worked there for the innkeeper. And so she was graduated to more responsibility, making soup. In fact, the innkeeper taught her some of her own recipes, and she was good. And one day that innkeeper popped her head through that swinging door, and she said, two bowls of soup, lickety-split. And then phew, she was gone. And it was unusual that she would be so forceful, so demanding. And some of the other young women said, why would she speak like that to you? And one of them went out to that door and peeked her head out. She called back, you'll never believe it. Out there, the king is visiting, the king of a foreign land. And he's brought with him his son, a prince. Oh, and many of them were delighted, not all of them, but many of them were delighted that there was a prince out there, because to some of them, that was the goal. And so a number of them began running past to see the prince. They were taking little gifts to take to him, anything that they could get close to the prince, to speak with him. And as they ran as a group past Jenny, she was ladling up those 2 bowls of soup, and one of them happened to bump into her backside at just the wrong moment. And the ring, her mother's ring, slipped off of her finger and splashed into one of those bowls of soup. "My ring," she called. And as she reached for the bowl, another woman said, "I'll give it to the prince." She grabbed the soup and ran out that door. "No," she said, "my ring's in there." And she went running after, but stopped at the door for fear of going beyond, for fear of any of them seeing her, especially the prince. Instead, she awayed up to her room upstairs and waited until the night fell, and she stepped out onto the balcony of her room, because behind the inn, there was a small garden. And even in the moonlight, she could see those wildflowers down there, and some cultivated, most of them closed up for the evening. And she looked out those flowers and mourned. And as she looked out, she saw something so curious. The moon that was shining down on those flowers, suddenly the moonlight appeared to be moving across the garden, across the flowers. No, it wasn't the moonlight, it was the moon moving across the sky until it was right over her, shining down on her, speaking to her. "Why do you cry? Child, why do you cry?" "Why do I cry? My mother is dead. I have to wear this donkey skin. I lost my ring today. Why do I cry? What kind of life is this that I lead?" We'll help for just a moment, or a few. And she felt the moon begin to blow down. And as the wind of the moon blew up into her face, she felt some of her burden lift. She turned and saw that that donkey skin had been blown off of her backside and was disappearing into the shadow of the balcony. And as she looked back toward the moon, the wind blew through the flowers and lifted up some of the petals off of the stems and blew them around until they just landed and adorned her hair and shoulders. And through the grass, the wind blew and lifted up some of the dew diamonds from the points of the blades up in the air until they landed all over to the skin of her face, bejeweled. She looked over the balcony to see what was coming next when she spotted down there the prince. He had to step out of that tavern. See, there were all these young women annoying him, bringing little gifts, trying to talk to him, pulling at his clothes, and social anxiety existed even in folk tales. He had stepped out for a breath of air. And as he walked around in the moonlight in that garden, he spoke aloud to himself. Don't they understand? Don't they understand that marriage isn't about becoming royal? Marriage isn't about gaining wealth or being with a prince. Marriage is about... And before he could finish the sentence, he heard from up here, love. And he turned and saw the most beautiful young woman he'd ever seen in his life. But that didn't even matter, because she understood him with that one word. Yes, he said, love. You understand? And she said, I do. I understand. But why do you cry? He said. Because, she said, just this evening, I've lost my ring. Your ring? He said as he placed his hand against the pocket of his pants. But before she could say anything else, any more explanation, she felt the wind cease. And she turned and saw that donkey skin coming back towards her backside. I have to go, I have to go. And she disappeared away into the shadows and into her room. No, the young prince said, but who are you? He ran inside the tavern. And even though he gave the description of this young woman over and over again, it didn't match anyone who lived there. But he knew that the ring belonged to her. And so he spent days that turned into weeks, roaming the hillsides, going through the hollers trying that ring on any finger that it would fit, any young woman's finger that it would fit, or any old woman's finger that it would fit, and it just didn't fit anyone's finger. So he came back around to the tavern one day and asked the innkeeper, again, "Is there any young woman here?" He described her again, who this ring might belong to. "Not that I know of, but you can try them all," and he did, and it didn't fit, and finally he made his way back out to that garden where he had first seen her. And as he stepped out behind the building, he noticed there was a donkey eating from the flowers. And he walked up behind it without being heard and placed his hand on the hind quarters of it. And as he did, it startled because it wasn't a donkey. It was a princess in a donkey skin. And she startled and stood up and saw who it was. She gasped, "Look away," she said, as she held up her hands like this. But as her hands went up, his came out, and the ring went down her finger and fit. And as the ring went over her finger, it was a wonder. Because in that moment, the moon passed over the sun. And as everything went dark, the birds stopped singing and the flowers became still. And when the moon passed fully over the sun and it became bright again, she was standing there without the skin. It was gone. He held that ring over her finger and looked in her eyes and said, "It's you." And she looked at him and said, "Yes." "And it's you?" And he said, "Yes." And it wasn't even 12 months later that the curtains were pulled closed and fresh cloth was stretched out and smoothed, and handfuls of flower petals scattered about the room fragranced the air, because the birthing bed had been made. The birthing bed that day would welcome a daughter who would be immediately a princess who would one day grow up to wear her grandmother's ring.
Okay. Now we're going to hear from, we have two of our torchbearers here tonight, and we're going to hear from them. And so, Samantha, are you ready to come and tell us the story? Samantha?
Just this here. All right, so this story is called Rosie Revere, Engineer, by Andrea Beatty. This is the story of Rosie Revere, who dreamed of becoming a great engineer. And in Lila Greer's classroom at Blue River Creek, young Rosie sat shyly, not daring to speak. But when no one was looking, she peeked in the trash for treasures to add to her engineer stash. And then late at night, Rosie rolled up those sleeves and she built in her hideaway under the eaves. So alone in her attic, the moon high above young Rosie, she made gizmos and she made gadgets she loved. And so when she grew sleepy, she hid those machines far under the bed where they'd never be seen. Shh. But of course, when Rosie was young, she had not been so shy. She worked with her hair swooping over one eye, and she made fine inventions for her uncles and her aunts. The hot dog dispenser and the helium pants, but the uncle she loved most, His name was Zookeeper Fred. So one day she had this idea to make him a hat to keep those naughty snakes off his head from parts of a fan and some cheddar cheese spray, which everyone knows keeps the pythons away. And when it was finished, young Rosie was proud, but Fred, he just slapped his knee and he chuckled out loud. And he laughed till he wheezed, and his eyes filled with tears, all to the horror of Rosie Revere, who stood there embarrassed, perplexed, and dismayed. Oh, she looked at that cheese hat and then looked away. I love it, Fred, no, truly I do, but Rosie Revere knew that could not be true. So she stuck that cheese hat on the back of her shelf, and after that day, kept all those dreams to herself. And that's how it went, until one autumn day when her oldest relation showed up for a stay. Her great-great-aunt Rose was a true dynamo who worked building airplanes a long time ago. So she told Rosie tales of things she had done and all of those glorious goals she had checked off her list one by one. But she gave a sad smile as she looked to the sky. The only thrill left, Rosie, on my list is to fly. But time never lingers as long as it seems. I think I should chalk that one up to an old lady's dreams. But that night, as Rosie laid wide-eyed in bed, a daring idea crept into her head. Could she build a gizmo to help her aunt fly? But she turned, and over her shoulder, she looked at that cheese hat and she said, no, not I. But of course, questions are tricky, and some hold on tight, and this one kept Rosie awake through the night. And so when dawn approached and red streaks lit the sky, young Rosie knew just how to make her aunt fly. So she worked and she worked till that day was half gone, and she hauled her cheese copter out onto the lawn to give this invention a test, just to see the ridiculous flop it might turn out to be. So she strapped herself into the cockpit and she flipped on that switch, and the Helio cheese copter, it sputtered and it twitched and it floated a moment and whirled round and froze for a heartbeat and crashed to the ground. Then young Rosie, she heard laughter, and she turned around to see that old woman laughing and slapping her knee. Oh, she laughed till she wheezed and her eyes filled with tears, all to again the horror of Rosie Revere, who thought, oh no, never, not ever again will I try to build something to sputter or spin or build with a lever, a switch, or a gear, and never will I be a great engineer. So she turned round to leave. But then great-great-aunt Rose came over and grabbed hold of young Rosie and pulled her in close, and she hugged her and she kissed her and she started to cry. You did it! Hooray, it's the perfect first try. This great flop is over, it's time for the next. Young Rosie was embarrassed, confused, and perplexed. But I failed, said dear Rosie. It's just made of trash, didn't you see? My cheese copter, it crashed. Yes, said her great aunt. It crashed, that is true, but first, Rosie, didn't you see? It did exactly what it needed to do. Before it crashed, Rosie. Before that, it flew. Your brilliant first flop was a raging success. Come on, let's get busy. And on to the next. So she handed her notebook to Rosie Revere, who smiled at her aunt as it all became clear. Life might have its failures, but this is not it. No, the only true failure can come when you quit. So she worked till the sun snuck away to its bed, and Aunt Rosie finally tied her headscarf around Rosie's head and sent her to bed with that big smile ear to ear to dream the bold dreams of a great engineer. And so at Blue River Creek, all those kids in grade 2, they now build gizmos and gadgets and doohickeys too. And with each perfect failure, they all stand and cheer, hooray! But none quite as proudly as Rosie Revere. Thank you.
All of these young people are judged and chosen, and so you're seeing, we've seen a lot of good storytellers among these young people, but you're seeing the creme de la creme, because these are the ones who rose to the top. And now, Skybird.
No, I need a fix. Do I sure have a hard act to follow up here? But this story is called How Jack Got to America. Now, it was way back in a long time ago, and there was this here boy named Jack. And he lived with his mama and two brothers, Will and Tom, up in England, and, well, times have been getting hard. Their daddy went off to work one day, never come back, didn't know what happened to him. So, one day, Jack's mama was saying, now one of you is going to have to go out and get a job, because we're broke, we ain't got no money, and we got to get by. So, Will said, well, I'll do it, I'm the oldest. So he went up the hills just walking, looking for a job, and he meets this man along the way, and he asks him, well, howdy, have you got a job or know anybody that knows if somebody's got a job? Well, as a matter of fact, I got 3 shifts that need to be filled in. Well, that's just great. I got 2 brothers at home. Okay, bring them up here and then we'll start. So he runs home and he gets Jack and he gets Tom and they go out and they get up there and Will says, well, I'll take first shift. And then Tom says, well, I'm the second oldest. I'll take second shift. And that leaving Jack, being the youngest, was third. So here goes Will just walking up the hill going to work and he meets this old woman. Oh, would you help me with these sticks? Now, woman, if I stop to help you with these sticks, I'm going to be late for work. If I'm late for work, my boss will fire me. My boss fires me, I ain't going to make no money. If I don't make no money, I'll never get out of the house. If I never get out of the house, I'm never going to make me no wife. I can't help you. And he goes on the way, and she just keeps trudging down the hill. And then, here comes Tom. Walking up the hill, going to work. There's the same woman with this bundle of sticks. Oh, could you help me with these sticks? Now, woman, if I stop to help you with these sticks, I gotta make no money. If I don't make no money, I'm never gonna get out of this house. If I never get out of this house, I'm never gonna get me no wife. I can't help you. He goes on up the hill. She just keeps trudging along. And Jack, all the way to third shift, and that woman still ain't halfway down the hill. And he gets there, and there she is. Oh, would you help me with these sticks? If I stop to help you with these sticks, I'm going to be late for work. If I'm late for work, my boss will fire me. My boss fires me, I ain't going to make no money. If I don't make no money, I'll never get out of the house. If I never get out of the house, I ain't going to make me no wife. Oh, please, please. Now, Jack had a good heart. So he said, okay, now, We got to make this speedy. So he reached and he got the bundle of sticks, and as soon as they hit the ground, she grabbed Jack, threw him over her back, and starts running. That woman went 80 miles an hour, and she's running with Jack on her back, and there's this big mountain. Jack's like, oh no, we're dead. If she don't slow down, we're going to crash in that mountain. It's going to be nothing but two crazy spots. And then, when she got closer to that mountain, it opened up. And she ran right inside it, pitch black dark, jumping over those sinkholes, through those fat man squeezes for 9 miles. And they get there into a cave, and she throws Jack down, hands him a wooden spoon. She said, now you stir this. And that woman, she was a witch. And she was making a potion to make her wise. And she had 1 year to make that potion. And she worked, and it was finally here, and he stirred day in and day out. Now, Jack, he couldn't get out of there. 9 miles into the pitch black darkness, he wasn't even going to try. Until one morning, she was out and she was gathering in some herbs, some leaves, and some bark off the trees, just finishing up to make sure. And so, there it is. The last drops boiled down, and the only drop left, bloop, into Jack's hand, and it burned. Ow! And he looked and all that wisdom went into Jack. Oh, Lordy, I worked for a year, and all that wisdom's into Jack. And she knew what she had to do. Now, she was thinking that she's going to eat Jack. If she ate Jack, all that wisdom would come with it. But Jack, being how wise he was, he knew what she was thinking. And being how wise he was, he starts running. And he makes it out of that cave. And I remember, she could run 80 miles an hour. So she's running after him, chasing him. And being how wise he was, he changed shape. He turned himself into a rabbit. Hippity-hoppity, hippity-hoppity. And she turned herself into a big old hen. Hippity-hoppity, hippity-hoppity. Hippity-hoppity, hippity-hoppity. And jumped over the log, jumped up and turned himself into a sparrow. The dog. And it's just a flying, and that witch turns herself into a hawk. And she's a soaring. And then right over a corn bed, he turns himself to a kernel of corn. And there he lays. And then he was being the best kernel of corn ever was. But she could almost see where he had landed with those big hawk eyes. And he laid there, and here she came. And now, she knew she had to eat the corn until she got Jack, but hawks don't like corn. That chickens like corn, so she turned herself into a chicken. And she swallowed Jack, and right in the middle of her throat, he turned himself into a baby. Well, just a crying, and she's like, trying to get him up, and she goes over there, and she sees some farmers just butchering hogs. She gets a pig bladder. She coughs him up in it, ties it up, it's like a big old balloon. She said, now there ain't room in England for the both of us. And she throws him into the ocean. And the waves take him farther and farther. And not only did he survive, but he'd grown. By now, Jack was a full-grown man. And he gets out there, rips himself out of that pig bladder, steps out. And he knew he was in America, being how wise he was. And being how wise he was, he knew the best place in America was Kentucky. So that's where he headed. And he got himself into the hog business. And he sent for his family down in England. They all moved down there to Kentucky, and they had a nice life. And that's the end of that story.